Hi guys, here's another video for you. This time it's on literary terms, and these are really important if you want to get the really high grades in your exams, because you just sound that much more sophisticated if you use them and you'll sound like you know what you're talking about, even if you don't. I'm just going to go through the most important ones, because if I try and overload you with stuff, you just won't remember the most important ones as well, which is really paramount. Also, I'll just talk you through the ones you're most likely to use, and I'll give you examples for some of them, because some of them can be quite hard to get your head around if you can't apply it to something. It's easier sometimes to apply things to understand them. I also might set up a written blog next to this for things like this, not so much with the Hamlet one that I did before, maybe, but yeah, especially with things that you have to go back and reference. I think it would be really useful for you. I've also got these in alphabetical order, so they're even easier for you to reference. The first one I'll start with is allegory. This is just an allegorical story is one with a surface narrative that has some sort of symbolism, or it's a metaphor for another meaning. A good example of this would be Carol Ann Duffy's Little Red Cap. It's from her anthology called The World's Wife. It's a brilliant anthology. And that is the story on the surface of Little Red Riding Hood. She's used that as inspiration. But the other meaning for that, the metaphorical meaning, is it's an autobiographical poem about when she had an affair with an older man when she was younger. Allegory is mainly used in poetry. It's used in poetry a lot. But there are allegorical novels such as George Orwell's Animal Farm and William Golding's The Lord of the Flies, which many of you will have studied at GCSE. The next one is blank verse. That's just unrhymed iambic pentameter. It's used a lot in Shakespeare. If you don't know what iambic pentameter means, then I'll go through that later in the video. The next one is dystopian novel. This is used to describe a novel that is set in or deals with an anti-utopian world. And that is just where everything has gone wrong because the characters are trying to perfect society. So George Orwell's Animal Farm is brilliant for this, because that presents the animals driving out the humans to create a perfect world, but it's then destroyed because they find out that some of the animals are actually just as corrupt as the humans. And now iambic pentameter. It's a common type of meter which includes 5 feet. Iambic means foot in Latin, I think. You don't necessarily need to know that, but I thought it was something quite interesting. But all you need to know is that it's a common type of meter with 5 feet, and each foot has 2 syllables. One is accented, one is unaccented, and again that's used a lot in the blank verse in Shakespeare. The next one is microcosm. That literally just means a small world, but in literary terms it's really useful for metaphor, because that small world can be brought out of the larger society. The next one is octave, which is just a stanza in a poem with 8 lines. Satire. This is a literary mode which ridicules, makes fun of foolish things in our society or life. It's often used in poetry. There's a lot of satirical poetry, especially modern poetry. And it's often witty, uses irony, ridicule and exaggeration. The sestet. This is just a stanza in a poem with 6 lines. I'll get onto sonnet now. sonnet is a 14-line poem which usually uses iambic pentameter and which has a varied rhyme scheme. There's two types of sonnet, the first being the Petrarchan sonnet, excuse me, which is normally divided into the first octave, which presents the problem, and then the second sestet is where the problem is resolved or commented on. The second kind is the Shakespearean sonnet, which wasn't actually invented by Shakespeare himself, but he was the one that made it famous. And that just comprises of 3 quatrains and a couplet to end. A quatrain, that's just a stanza in a poem with 4 lines. And the last one is verisimilitude. This is the way in which the characters and the actions create a sense of realism in a literary work. Well, I hope you've really found this video useful. I've really enjoyed making these videos, and I realised that my last one was really long, and it was really hard to edit and upload to YouTube because it just took so long. But yeah, I hope you find it useful, and I may or may not get that written blog up for you, but if I do, I'll put the link below. And yeah, so I hope you found it useful, and I hope I'll be making more videos for you in the future. Thanks.